My father is about 80 right now. And about 10 years ago, he did a little bit of a funny thing for a 70-year-old man. He started a limo business. He's retired and he likes to drive. And so he still to this day drives limo. He has his own car and he goes down to Philadelphia and Newark airports a lot and things like that. And every once in a while, he was in a bind and he would get myself or one of my brothers to drive for him. And a number of years ago, I did just that. I took a drive up to Newark Airport to pick up I guess I took somebody to Newark Airport and dropped them off for their flight. And so when I was finished, I took off my overcoat and my suit jacket because it's a limo driver. It's a legit limo company. We wear suit and ties to get people around. And I was finished. I dropped off the customer at the airport, and I threw my coat in the trunk. And I went to close the trunk, and I tried to close it, and it popped open. I thought, that's weird. So I pushed it down again, popped open again. Pushed it down again, popped up again. I thought, what in the world? His trunk's broken. Tried it again, and I thought, rats. What in the world am I going to do? I'm at Newark Airport. I got 2 hours or so to drive home. How in the world am I going to drive home with my trunk open? And I thought for a moment, and I thought, oh, the keys to the car are in my pocket in my coat. And the car is smart enough to know that if I put the keys in the trunk, it won't let it lock the trunk. I thought, well, isn't that convenient? Because conversely, how many of you had the other experience? Maybe not in the trunk, but in the car. I remember Yvonne and I were on a trip one time, and actually it was a trip from, I forget which direction we were going, Virginia to Pennsylvania or Pennsylvania to Virginia. It doesn't really matter. But we stopped, and I ran into McDonald's to get a cup of coffee, and Yvonne said, oh, I'll come in. So she came after me. We went out, and I said, where are the keys? Looked in the windows, and there they were, in the ignition. Drat. So what do you do? Well, our story is a little different on this, but normally what you do is somebody, check my mic, turn that down there, Gravy, just a second. Let me check this to make sure it's tight. It is. Sorry about that. But normally what you would do is you would call AAA or a locksmith to come out. And locksmiths are interesting because Yvonne had a cousin or has a cousin who was a locksmith, and he was talking to me about this one time. He says, yeah, I can open up doors pretty easy. And what happens is I go to open up a car door or a car or house or that kind of thing, and I'll open it, and the customer's all panicky and fidgety, and they're beside themselves. They lock their keys in their car, and how are they going to get home, or they can't get in their house? What are we going to do? Do we have to break the window? It's like, no, just calm down. We can get it taken care of. And he goes about his work and opens the door. And he says customers have a very predictable reaction. It's all kind of the same. The first reaction is like, oh, this is wonderful. Thank you so much. We were afraid we're going to have to break windows or pry open the doors or something like that, some terrible thing. And thank you so much for unlocking the door. We are so happy. And then he says, almost universally, what happens is people move from joyous to a countenance that's really concerned. It's like, if you could get in there that easy, then what about all our other locks? It's like, that was way too easy. Have you ever seen one of these guys open up a car door? They're just casually talking to you. It's like, yeah, how's it going? We'll get this open in a minute. And they're doing their work, not really paying attention to anything. And then all of a sudden, there you go. And you're thinking, if they really put their mind to it, they could probably do it in about 15 seconds. So we get this moment of like, ooh, this guy has some power that I didn't really totally expect or anticipate. This guy can get places that the average person can't. There's a story in the Gospel of Mark that talks about this a little bit. A story that's told by Mark from Peter, who recounts this time when Peter was part of this story. Let me read this story to you out of Mark chapter 4. Mark chapter 4, verse 35. It says, "On that day, when evening had come, he said to them," Jesus said to them, "Let us go across to the other side of the lake, the Sea of Galilee. And leaving the crowd, he took with them in the boat just as he was." He took them with him in the boat just as they were. And the boats and other boats were with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so the boat was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on a cushion, and they woke him and said, "Teacher, don't you care that we are perishing?" And he awoke, he rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. He said to them, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great fear, and they said to one another, "Who then is this? Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" When we read this story, if you've ever visualized yourself on the sea in a storm, you might be captured by the magnitude of Jesus saying, "Peace, be still." The wind and the waves are crashing around us, and it's terrifying. We are short of something helping us, that we are going to sink. And Jesus speaks the words, "Peace, be still." We are so taken up at first by, "Wow, that is cool. How did he do that? I'm safe. We aren't going to go sinking. We aren't going to die today." The wind and the storm calmed. But then, can you see it? You can almost see the countenance, almost in progression, the disciples, one right after another, thinking, "Hold it. Hold it." He just said, "Peace, be still." And things stopped. Who is this guy? Who then is this that can speak to the wind and the seas, and they obey? We've started this series that we're calling Just Jesus. A couple weeks ago, we're looking through the first 8 chapters of the Gospel of Mark. Mark was written by Mark. We believe it was Mark that had connection with Peter, the Apostle Peter, one who walked with Jesus. We believe it's Peter who dictated or told the story of Jesus to Mark, and Mark faithfully wrote it down. So it comes with a very reliable first-hand witness. This is where Mark wouldn't have walked as a disciple. It's likely that Mark walked and lived during that time. He was a contemporary of Jesus, so he would have known. He wouldn't have been named as a disciple. But just Jesus. We are stripping away all the external things. We're trying to focus in on all those things that we see and capture our attention are there, but we want to focus in on just Jesus. Who is this Jesus, and what is he about? Who then is this this just Jesus. And Mark's been telling us and pointing to us about who Jesus is, and we may have missed it. When we read the Gospels and when we preach sermons, we oftentimes take a shorter section of Scripture. We might take 10, 15, 20 verses or a chapter at a time and look at them. And that's good because it's too hard to capture the whole thing at one time. But occasionally it's good to step back and take a look at the whole and see what's going on, because then we can see what's happening. And so for just a moment, I want us to go back and look at some of the things that Mark has been doing to point us the way he's been pointing us to Jesus. Chapter 2, verse 10, if you want to flip back and look real quick, you'll see that it says here about Jesus that you may know that the Son of God, this is Jesus speaking, that the Son of God has authority on earth to forgive sins. This Jesus has the authority to forgive sins. Forgiving sins. Jesus, verse 17 in chapter 2, he's eating meals with tax collectors. Eating meals with the undesirables. Eating meals with people we don't like. But he's crossing boundaries, this Jesus. And he says the reason that he does this is those who are well. They don't need a physician. But those who are sick, I come to call the righteous, not call the righteous, but the sinners. Each year I go to the doctor and I get an annual exam. This year, I just went this past week. And in some ways it felt like a waste of time because I showed up and she asked me a few questions. It's like, has this changed? No. Has this changed? No. Anything concerning you? No. Any problems? No, not really. Okay. She pokes on your belly a few times, pokes you in the neck, listens to your heart and your lungs and said, you look good. Come back another year. We do that because it's occasionally good to get a kind of a pulse, a check, make sure that there is nothing that's going on. This year, I was fortunate that there was no markers or signs or things to be concerned about. But when we're feeling ill, that's when we go to a doctor, right? I have this pain here, this hurt there, the thing in my ear, whatever, and they can help you out. We go to the doctor when we're sick, and Jesus is reaching the people that are sick, that are in need of a touch. That's who Jesus is. Verse 27 in chapter 2. Jesus is doing some stuff that's just sort of playing with people's minds a little bit, or working with some things and redefining things. He is doing some things that seem like they're breaking the laws of Moses. But Jesus is explaining and saying, no, you don't have a full understanding. He says the Sabbath, he's breaking the laws of the Sabbath, or at least seemingly so. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for Sabbath. So the Son of Man is even the Lord of the Sabbath. We're getting more of a picture of who Jesus is. He has authority over sin. He reaches out to those who need him most. He is helping us understand what it means to be a follower of God, and what that, in this case, the laws and the Sabbath, and how that plays out. And then jump over to chapter 3, verse 23. The people are saying, well, then we've decided who this Jesus is. We don't understand what he is. We don't understand what's going on. It just seems creepy and weird to him. So clearly, he's the devil. That'll fix him. If we call him the devil, then that'll put him in his place, right? And Jesus says, hold it. How can Satan cast out Satan? It makes no sense. How can I, the one who has authority forgive sins and to help people to righteousness, your logic isn't even making any sense. A kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. And we see that all the time. You see problems in the workplace, a business that the employees don't get along, in athletics, a sporting team, they don't get along with one another. There's corporations that the leaders don't get along. Believe it or not, it actually happens in churches every once in a while too. That people don't seem to be on the same page. They're divided, and so they separate, right? We see that. And so Jesus is saying, your logic doesn't make sense. I can't be the devil if I'm doing these things. But all these things, the people were looking, and we do that as well. We look at things and we see the spectacular. We see the wind and the waves. We see the torment in our life, and we focus on them. And it's so easy to get distracted on these things because they're so much in front of us. They're right there. We don't know what to do with it. I'm a detailed-oriented person. I see things, and it feels like a blessing and a curse sometimes. I'll come into the building sometimes and I'll look around and go, something's not right in here. And it just, in some ways it's great, in other ways it drives me bananas. But I had a person that was also a little bit like that, and so I appreciated talking with her at the first church I pastored, and she was telling me one day, she goes, up on the lights, the stage lighting, there's a cobweb. And it drives me bananas. I see it every week. And it just, now you're all looking, I think we're pretty well clean today. But it was a cobweb that was just, for some reason, it was driving her crazy. And so sometime during the week, I got a ladder up and I went down and I cleaned it down and said, there you go, that'll help her so she won't be so distracted during worship. But that can happen. We get distracted, we get fixated on things, and maybe it's not a cobweb, maybe it's not a detail like that. But we see things in life that are much more dynamic and much more significant that we become focused on. I mean, maybe there's an injury in your life that just won't heal. About a year and a half ago, I was running and I slipped off the side of the road and I tore a meniscus in my knee. I had it fixed a while ago and it's still not great. It's annoying. It's like, I'd like to get back to regular activity, but every time I try to do something, it's like this thing bothers me. And it's sort of there, and it's a focus of me. And maybe something like that happens to you. There's something that's a difficulty. Maybe you got a diagnosis that the doctor said, this is going on, and you swallow deep and you think, oh boy, is this going to redefine or change the rest of my life? And we become focused. It's significant. We become focused on it. Maybe there's a relationship that you just, the person you love them, a friend, a family member, whoever, and no matter what, you just can't fix it. You offended them somehow or another, and you try, and it just seems like they're resolute that we will not get along. Maybe there's a friend or a family member, they're making some choices that you're going, oh no, don't do that. I know you think I'm an old man. I know you think I'm an old woman. I know you think I don't know anything, but listen, I can help you. You don't want to go down that road. And it hurts. You feel you're distracted. You see them. You see all those things happening there. Maybe there's another circumstance in your life that you're just like, I don't know what to do. There's no hope. I'm stuck in this job. I'm stuck in this situation. There's no possible way I'll get out of it. You're stuck. You're fixated on that. That's what you see because that's your wind and waves. That's your monster. That's your mountain in front of you that won't move. Maybe it's bigger than that. Maybe the state, local, global governments are making choices that you go, oh, what are we going to do? I wish we, a couple of us could do something, but we feel helpless. All those things, they surround us. They get our attention. They're wind and waves. But Jesus says in verse 3 of Mark 4, listen. Listen. Hey, listen. Look at me. Look at me. Your parents ever say that? Look at me. Right here. Listen, listen, listen. Sometimes you got to get somebody's attention and say, look at me. Are you listening? I have something I need to tell you. Listen. I remember my son Joshua, when he was small, about, below 10 or so. I used to say about Joshua that he would run everywhere for no particular reason. And for a while, I'd sit him down and I said, Joshua, listen to me. When I call you, I need you to listen. I don't need you to stop and say why. I said, there might be danger that I need you to stop immediately. I was trying to train him to help him. When you hear my voice, I need you to listen. Because I want the best for you. Jesus here is saying, I want the best for you. I want you to listen. Listen to me. Ashley told the story of the sower and the seed, and it's interesting the way Mark puts this in sequence. Chapter 4 of Mark, he tells a lot of stories about seeds. But then at the end, he puts this story about Jesus calming the storm. And when I looked at this, I thought, why? Why did Jesus put all these sower and seeds in one, and then all of a sudden he says, oh, by the way, in the same day, we went out in the boat and he calmed the storm. What was that all about? We're tempted to look at the story of the soil and the seed and say, okay, be careful what soils you're planted in. Or there's harvest out there and some will come and others won't. But let's look at the story again from another perspective. Because Jesus starts out the story by saying, listen to me. Listen. He's rather emphatic. Listen. Verse 14. The sower sows the word. This is the story that Jesus is telling. It's a parable. It's a made-up story about an illustration of something that's in the world and coming to faith. The sower sows the word. Listen for all the words and the speaking here. The sower sows the word. And these things are the ones along the path where the word is sown. When they hear, Satan immediately comes and takes away the word that is sown in them. And these are the ones sown in the rocky soil. The ones who, when they hear the word, they immediately receive it with joy. And then they have no root in themselves, but they endure for a while. Then, when tribulation and persecution arises on account of the word, immediately they fall away. And others are the ones sown among the thorns. They are those who hear the word. But the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of the riches and the desires for other things enter in and choke the word. And it proves unfaithful. But those who are sown on good soil are the ones who hear the word and accept it and bear fruit 30, 60-fold, and 100-fold. He continues right after that and gives a story of that we say that we don't put a light under a basket. That's silly. If we have a light, we let it shine. And then he concludes all this by quoting Isaiah in verse 23 of chapter 4. If anyone who has ears, let them hear. Jesus wants us to hear what's going on. He wants to listen. He wants us to listen to what is happening. He wants us to hear him. We can be so distracted by the trials and the tribulations and the difficulties and all that's going on, the storms, the wind, the rain around us. But Jesus says, listen. Listen to me. Because if Jesus has the power to speak to the wind and the waves and it is calmed and they obey, then Jesus has the power to speak to you and to me. Jesus has the power to speak to you and me. And everyone who listens and everyone who obeys and hears his voice will have abundant life and fruitfulness. Above all the circumstances, above all the situations, Jesus is calling on us and saying, listen, I want you to focus on me. Because I'm the one who is truly the powerful one to be able to calm all those things in your life, all those torments, all those tribulations. Jesus is saying, peace, be still. And there's stillness. And he says, why are you so afraid? Do you not have faith? If you listen. Jesus has the power to calm the wind and the rain and the waves. If Jesus has that power, then what kind of power does he have in my life? Jesus has power to heal the sick and the lame and the blind. Then what kind of power does he have then in my life? Jesus has the power to change circumstances and to change the order of things. Then what kind of power does Jesus have in my life? If Jesus then has the power to calm the wind and the waves, then the things that I find a distraction, albeit important, he has to have the power to speak into those. But it all begins with listening. Can we hear his voice? So this is what you can do this week. First of all, just be aware. Recognize what are the things that distract you. Again, they might be important. They probably are. I don't want to minimize them. If you're struggling with health or a sickness or a diagnosis or a bad circumstance or a family relationship that seems to be falling apart, that's important. But recognize that, name it. This is the thing that distracts me. This is the thing that gets my attention. And then listen. Listen for the voice of God. In what way is God saying, this is what I want to speak over that? I'm asking you to change the way you think this morning. Because so many times we go to approach God and we say, that story about calming the wind and the waves, that's really cool. It never happened to me. Why not? If Jesus has the power to calm the wind and the waves, and Jesus loves you as a father who wants the very best, then Jesus has the power to calm the wind and the waves in your life. He's just calling out and saying, listen to me. Listen. Hear and obey my voice. God, we come to you today, and in this moment, we just make a pause. In this quietness, may we hear your voice. We're so thankful, Lord, that you've recorded and you've kept the scriptures, the words of the stories of you preserved for us that we can read them. Lord, I confess that for all too many times I read them and I say, that's a neat story. I wish it was true for me. But today, Lord, I believe that you're telling us it is true for you. If you hear my voice, you listen and obey, I can calm the wind and the waves in your life. So, Lord, I pray that we would receive and experience the peace and the stillness that comes from hearing and obeying and listening to your voice. So, Lord, may you minister to each one of us that we could hear and know what you're calling us to do. Pray this in your mighty name.